exhaustive about this. Let me illustrate, because this type of danger could turn out the conjuncture right now from this favorable situation in terms of the terms of exchange for the global south to another type of situation. During the 70s, all the momentum about the new economic order and the expectations about the possibilities of other type of income distribution and international division of labor, remember the new economic international order, were totally blocked by a single administrative measure on behalf of Mr. Volcker, the President of the Federal Reserve of the United States. The increase of the interest rates, the nominal interest rates in the United States, created a situation that increased the nominal service of the debt, not only in Latin America and in the South, but also in the Soviet bloc, in the state socialist countries. Most of them collapsed after 1 decade of this. It creates the conditions for internal adjustment here in China. It created the conditions for the destruction of the national liberation processes in Africa. It stopped the process of decolonization all around the world, and it changed also the internal balance of power between labor and capital in the North. The possibilities that the increase in the service of the debt created were enhanced because on top of that you have a stronger dollar. The increase in the interest rate enhance the value of the dollar in the international markets, so most of the countries should obtain a surplus in external currency, in hard currency, competing with each other. 180 countries desperate to obtain some surplus in dollar in order to pay the debt. That immediately created the conditions for cheapening our exports, turning out the trend in terms of the terms of exchange, the relative prices of our exports, and that created a huge transfer of resources from the north to the south, with the self-exploitation of our communities, the self-exploitation of our families, the self-exploitation of the women's worker at the level of the periphery within our countries. The same type of situation could happen today. This change in the balance of power between labor and capital in the north implied a situation in which you have a reduction in the rhythm of growth of salaries, of wages in the GDP in the north, like in this trend, that after the co-evolution during the golden years of capitalism, you have a decoupling here, and an increase, an upward trend in terms of consumption that was only covered by over-indebted. That is the credit card. The other side of the same coin is, as we saw before, the recovery of the rate of profit in the north, but the permanent depression of the investment stimulus, the productive investment activity. This gap between more profits and less productive investment has been covered through financial innovations. What I'm trying to say here is that the problem of speculation, this hypertrophy of the speculative apparatus, is not an excess, is not the irrational exuberance that Mr. Greenspan used to refer to. This is a structural problem of the system. And this is an irreversible situation. Because if capitalism could purge itself out of this speculative apparatus, it's going to face the problem of productive investment opportunities. And if capital return to the productive investment, is going to exacerbate the problem of overproduction. Now we are in the middle of this tragedy, capital prisoner of its own success. Colossal amounts of capital concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, reclaiming higher and higher profit rates that immediately are searching for fresh opportunities of profitable investment. You know, capitalists could have vacations. Capitals can't. Compulsory logic of capital demands more and more obsessive opportunities of investment. As they cannot obtain those opportunities in the realm of the real economy, and be aware, be very careful about this ideology about the post-industrial societies. Be very careful here in China. This is not a technocratical situation. There is a hierarchical, ontological situation, an ontological feature of the real economy opposed to the financial economy. The sphere of circulation has a subordinated nature with respect to the real economy. So it is not the same to have a GDP source based upon the industrial apparatus than a GDP based upon, as in the case of the United States, and more so in the case of the United Kingdom, in the FIRE sector, finance, insurance, and real estate. Those are redistributional mechanisms that are at the core of a distorted measurement. The real economy is the only source of profits. The real economy is the only source of revenue. And you know, the real material substratum of the exchange value dynamic is the use value dynamic. And we are in the middle of a civilizatory crisis. We are in the middle of a crisis, an ecological crisis that demands a huge effort in the jump, in the qualitative jump in the technological paradigm in order to assure the survival of the species. The organization of the noosphere now is at stake. And that is the type of challenges that we need to face immediately. But what happened now in terms of the real structure of power? The concentration of power has granted a situation in which the basic dynamics of reproduction in the core of the system has been located basically in the dynamic of derivatives. Those colossal amounts of capital searching for opportunities of profits have been allocated in terms of financial innovations, the speculative apparatus. While the real economy here, imperfectly represented by the global GDP, has been decelerating and larger and larger amounts of uncertainty and volatility. Right now, the proportion is more or less $63 trillion in the global GDP versus $1,500 trillion in financial derivatives. So we are talking about an amount of outstanding debts claiming for revenue 25 times the real source of revenues. So it is not possible, not because I'm a radical, not because I'm a bad person and I don't want to bail out the bankers. No, it is impossible, even if through these mechanisms of transferring costs to the poor people all around the world, it is impossible to bail out this structural insolvency. It's almost 25 years. That means 25 years of people not eating at all in the world, and it is impossible to solve the problem of structural indebtedness. And this debt is not registered in terms of the national accounting system. You know, the relationship is $117 trillion of public and private debt versus $63 trillion of total GDP. What we are talking is another type of debts, much more immediate one because they are short-term debts related to financial innovations. And those represent, again, $1.5 quadrillion, $1,500 trillion. It is impossible to solve the problem through liquidity injections. It is impossible to solve the problems with the corruption of the governments and the complicity of the governments pouring all the mechanisms in favor of the bankers' pockets. And we are talking not about a macroeconomic phenomenon. We are talking about power structures, in the middle of economic and financial warfare among them. You know, the conflict between China and the United States and Europe and England is not a macroeconomic problem. It's not a problem of global imbalances, as has been pictured in the G20 meetings. This is a problem of power. This is a dispute, a historical dispute for hegemony. Look, those are the traditional concerns of the macroeconomists. This is the deficit in the United States, and that is the more recent and smaller deficit in Europe that has been supposedly resolved or financed by the surpluses in China and in the global south. This spaghetti, this noodle bowl, represents the actual financial transactions. The thickness, the width of the arrows represent the amount of transactions. And you can see here that most of the transactions are within the financial centers and among them. Can you see where is the financing from China to the United States? Not at all. There is not only a quantitative decoupling of the financial apparatus with respect to the real economy. There is also a qualitative decoupling. We are talking about a self-referent system of property and claims and entitlements to profits that are at stake right now. In huge amounts. And the center of the dispute comes from the shadow banking. A new type of liquidity that has not been addressed either by the orthodox economists, neither by the heterodox economists, that resolve the problem of the day-to-day, the treasury, the cash flow problem of the big banks. And most of this financial liquidity provider mechanism is based upon financial innovations that are out of the balance sheets of the banks, that represents precisely the 25 times the real economy. And you know what? The key of this huge, this giant structure, superstructure in the global network of finance is based upon the dollar and the dollar monopoly of the liquidity. And the provision of the dollar monopoly of the liquidity do not reside upon the central banks. This is a minimum quantity. The day-to-day cash flow came out of other type of physically requiring cash activities, transactions, like remittances, like laundry, drug trafficking. And that is the real target, and that is the real, the secret dispute for power today. The corruption in the system now is not an exogenous, an individual excess of some individuals, of some bankers and some regulators. This is at the core of the system. The system has provoked, has created a criminogenic environment, known from the moralistic or point of view of the left or the socialist point of view or the ethics of the decent people of the world. No, we are talking in reference to the values and the laws that they had written. They cannot comply with the laws that they had written, and they cannot comply with the values that they had propagated in the world during the last 5 centuries. The capitalist modernity now is dysfunctional to the process of accumulation of capital, to the process of power reproduction today. And this is worsening as we are talking, with such a ferocity, with such a velocity that is changing the world as we know it. And we need to understand that politics, as we knew it, are over. We need to create other types of coalitions precisely responding to this situation in which most of the profits, most of the dispute came out of the financial profits. In a system in which the whole pyramid in the world, the whole network in the world, creates different mechanisms of siphoning out resources toward the center of the system, the Anglo-American financial oligarchy. Under those circumstances in which you have a colossal, without precedents, concentration of power, and that means a colossal concentration of agency. It is not the same what happens in these 147 corporations that control 40% of the world's GDP,